Imagine being born a prince, wrapped in silk, destined to rule an empire, only to have your own family carve out your eyes before you could grow a beard. Picture this: Constantinople, 1057. The morning sun catches the golden dome of Hagia Sophia, casting light that dances across marble floors worn smooth by 1,000 years of imperial footsteps. In the great palace, a 12-year-old boy named Constantine awakens to the sound of his nursemaid weeping. He doesn't know yet that today his uncle the emperor has signed his death warrant. Not death by blade or poison, but something far more calculated, far more cruel. Today, young Constantine will learn what it truly means to be born into the purple. The Byzantine Empire, that glittering remnant of Rome that refused to die. For over 1,000 years, it had survived barbarian invasions, crusades, plagues, and the rise and fall of dynasties. But perhaps its greatest enemy was not external. Perhaps it was the very blood that flowed through its imperial veins. Step with me into the Boukoleon Palace, where the air itself seems to shimmer with power. The walls are adorned with mosaics that tell stories of conquest Christ Pantocrator, gazing down with eyes that seem to follow you, while below, emperors in golden halos receive tribute from kneeling barbarians. The scent of myrrh and frankincense mingles with the sweet perfume of rosewater that servants sprinkle on the marble floors. Courtiers glide through corridors like silk-wrapped ghosts, their voices barely above whispers, their eyes constantly calculating. Every gesture is choreographed, every word weighed for its political implications. Here, in this palace, ceremony is not mere pageantry, it is the very foundation of power. The emperor does not simply rule. He is the living image of Christ on earth, the chosen of God, draped in robes that cost more than most men see in a lifetime. When he speaks, courtiers prostrate themselves so completely that their foreheads touch the cold marble. When he moves, the very rustling of his silk garments sounds like whispered prayers. But listen carefully. Do you hear it? Beneath the chanting of the palace chapel, beneath the soft footfalls of eunuch servants, beneath the distant splash of fountains in hidden courtyards, there is another sound. The quiet, persistent scratch of stylus on wax, as scribes record every word, every glance, every potential threat to the throne. Young Constantine knows nothing of this yet. To him, the palace is a wonderland of golden corridors and secret passages, of tutors who teach him Greek philosophy and Latin rhetoric, of silk cushions and honey cakes brought by smiling servants. His world is bounded by marble and mosaics, by the gentle correction of his tutors and the loving attention of his nursemaid, old Theoctiste. "Tell me again about the great Constantine," the boy asks her, as she braids his dark hair with threads of gold. "Tell me about the emperor I'm named for." Theoctiste's weathered hands pause in their work. She has served 3 emperors, has seen princes rise and fall like the tide. "He was great indeed, little master," she whispers. "He founded this city, made it the new Rome. But greatness," she hesitates, glancing toward the door, "greatness in this place comes with a price." The boy doesn't understand. How could he? He is 12 years old, born into silk and gold, raised on stories of imperial glory. The purple-born, they call children like Hymporphyrogenitos those who drew their first breath in the purple-draped birthing chamber of emperors. But what young Constantine doesn't know, what perhaps no child born to power can truly understand, is that the purple that marks his birthright is the same purple that will, one day, become the color of his destruction. The emperor, Isaac Komnenos, sits upon the throne of his ancestors, but sleep eludes him. It is past midnight, and still he paces the imperial chambers, his bare feet silent on the geometric patterns of the marble floor. Through the narrow windows, Constantinople spreads below him like a jeweled necklacia, city of 500,000 souls, all of them his subjects, all of them his responsibility, and all of them in some way his potential enemies. You see, in Byzantium, the throne belonged not to the eldest son, not to the designated heir, but to the strongest claimant. This was not a kingdom where bloodline guaranteed succession. This was an empire where power flowed to whoever could seize it, hold it, and defend it from all challengers, including those who shared their blood. Isaac's advisors have been whispering again. The grand logothete, Nikephoros, approaches with the careful steps of a man walking on ice. "Basileus," he says, Using the ancient title that means king, emperor, we must speak of the boy. Constantine is my nephew, Isaac replies, but his voice lacks conviction. He is a child. Children grow, Basileus. And this child. Nikephoros pauses, choosing his words like a man selecting arrows for a battle. This child is beloved by the palace guard. They remember his father fondly. They speak of him as the rightful heir. Do you understand what is happening here? In the marble halls of power, a 12-year-old boy's popularity with soldiers becomes a death sentence. His charm, his noble bearing, his very blood lineal of these become weapons that others might use against the sitting emperor. Isaac turns to the window, staring out at the city that has consumed so many of his predecessors. My brother named him heir before he died, he says quietly. How can I? Because you must, comes another voice from the shadows. The Parakoimomenos, the chief palace administrator, steps forward. This is Leo, a eunuch who has served the imperial court for 30 years, who has seen emperors rise and fall like wheat before the scythe. Basilius, mercy is a luxury that emperors cannot afford. Your brother is dead, his son lives. As long as the boy can see, as long as he can hold a sword, as long as he can sire heirs of his own, he is a threat to your throne and to the stability of the empire. What would you have me do? Isaac asks, though he already knows the answer. They all know the answer. It is the Byzantine solution, elegant in its cruelty, practiced for generations. The boy need not die, Leo says softly, but he must never be able to rule. In the silence that follows, you can almost hear the weight of history pressing down upon them. This is how empires eat their own children, not with dramatic proclamations or public executions, but with quiet conversations in marble chambers, with the cold logic of survival applied to the warm flesh of family. Miles away, in his chamber, young Constantine sleeps peacefully on silk sheets, unaware that his fate is being decided by uncles and eunuchs, who speak of him as if he were a piece on a chessboard rather than a living, breathing child who still asks his nursemaid to check under his bed for monsters. If only he knew that the real monsters were already in the palace, wearing the faces of family. The morning arrives with deceptive gentleness. Constantine wakes to the sound of birds singing in the palace gardens, the same birds that have sung for 1,000 years of emperors. Theoctiste brings him his breakfast warm bread with honey, fresh grapes, and goat's milk cooled in the palace cisterns. Where is my uncle? The boy asks, noticing the unusual quiet in the corridors. He promised to continue our lesson on military tactics today. Theoctiste's hands tremble as she pours the milk. She has been crying. Her eyes are red, rimmed, and she cannot meet the boy's gaze. Your uncle is occupied with matters of state, little master. But it is not the emperor who comes to Constantine's chamber. It is Leo, the Parakoimomenos, accompanied by 4 guards whose faces are hidden behind the ceremonial masks of the palace executioners. These men have served the empire faithfully for years, carrying out the will of emperors without question, without emotion, without mercy. Young Constantine, Leo says, his voice as smooth as the marble floors, your uncle requires your presence in the hall of 19 Acubita. The boy rises, straightening his silk tunic. He has been taught that imperial summons are not to be questioned, that the emperor's word is law. But something in Leo's tone, something in the way the guards stand with their hands resting on their sword hilts, makes his stomach clench with inexplicable dread. The Hall of 19 Acubita is one of the most sacred spaces in the Palacia vast chamber, where emperors have been crowned, where diplomatic marriages have been celebrated, where the fate of nations has been decided. Today, it has been prepared for a different kind of ceremony. Constantine enters to find his uncle seated upon a throne that seems too large for his frame. Isaac's face is pale. His hands grip the armrests so tightly that his knuckles are white. To his left stands Nikephoros, the Grand Logothete, holding a scroll of parchment. To his right, a figure that makes Constantine's blood run cold, the palace physician Stephanos, carrying a leather satchel that clinks softly with the sound of metal instruments. Constantine, Isaac says, and his voice cracks slightly. My nephew, my brother's son. The boy approaches the throne, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. The golden mosaics on the walls seem to watch him, Christ in majesty, the Virgin Mary, the apostles, all with eyes that have witnessed countless imperial ceremonies. But today, they will witness something else entirely. Uncle Constantine says, his voice small in the enormous chamber, "Have I done something wrong?" The silence stretches like a drawn bowstring. Finally, Isaac speaks. "You have done nothing wrong, child, but you are your father's son, and that is enough." Nikephoros unfurls the scroll. His voice is steady, bureaucratic, as if he were reading a routine proclamation rather than pronouncing the doom of a 12-year-old boy. By order of His Imperial Majesty, Isaac Komnenos, Basileus of the Romans, it is decreed that Constantine, son of the late Emperor John Komnenos, shall be rendered incapable of imperial rule, according to the ancient laws and customs of the empire. What would you do in that moment? What would you do if you were 12 years old, standing in a vast hall of marble and gold, watching your own uncle, your father's brother, condemn you to a fate worse than death? Constantine's legs begin to shake. He doesn't fully understand the formal language of the proclamation, but he understands enough. He has heard whispers from the servants, stories of other princes, other threats to the throne. He knows what rendered incapable of imperial rule means. "Please," he whispers, his voice barely audible. "Uncle, please. I don't want to be emperor. I just want to study philosophy, to read the old books, to—" "It is not what you want," Isaac interrupts, his voice hollow with the weight of imperial necessity. "It is what others might want for you, what they might do in your name." The physician Stephanos approaches, his soft-soled shoes silent on the marble. In his satchel are the tools of his trade knot, the instruments of healing, but the precise, sharp implements of imperial justice. A thin, curved blade, no longer than a man's finger, a silver spoon, polished to a mirror shine, strips of silk for binding, a vial of poppy extract to dull the pain, because even in their cruelty, the Byzantines were not entirely without mercy. "It will be quick," Stephanos says, his voice professional, detached. "You will feel no pain after the first moment. You will live, young master. You will be cared for, honored, given every comfort. You will simply never rule." Constantine's knees buckle. He falls to the marble floor, his silk robes pooling around him like spilled blood. "Theoctiste," he cries, his voice breaking. "I want Theoctiste. I want my mother. Please, I want to see my mother one last time." But his mother is dead, has been dead for 3 years, and Theoctiste, dear old Theoctiste, is locked in her chamber, weeping for a boy she raised from infancy, a boy she cannot save. The guards move forward. They are gentle as men can be when performing such a task. They have done this before, not often, but enough times to know how to minimize the trauma, how to hold a struggling child without causing unnecessary pain. "Look at me, Constantine," Leo says, kneeling beside the boy. "Look at me, not at them. Think of your philosophy lessons. Think of Marcus Aurelius. What did he say about accepting what cannot be changed?" But Constantine is 12 years old, and all the philosophy in the world cannot prepare a child for the moment when his own family decides he is too dangerous to see the sunrise. The silver spoon glints in the light from the high windows. Stephanos has done this before, has rendered threats to the throne safe with the precision of a master craftsman. The curved blade is sharper than any sword, designed not to kill but to maim with surgical precision. "Hold him steady," Stephanos says quietly. "It will be over in moments." And in that marble hall, where emperors have been crowned and dynasties have been founded, where the fate of nations has been decided with the flourish of a pen, a 12-year-old boy loses his sight forever, not to enemies on a battlefield, not to disease or accident, but to the cold logic of imperial survival. His screams echo off the golden mosaics, off the marble columns, off the painted ceiling where Christ in majesty looks down with eyes that see all and judge all, but the screams last only moments. The silence that follows lasts forever. 10 years have passed. Constantine, now a man of 22, sits in his chambers in the palace of Boukoleon, his quarters lavishly appointed with silk tapestries, silver vessels, and shelves lined with books he will never read again. His world has shrunk to the dimensions of touch and sound, to the familiar geography of his rooms and the patient voices of his servants. He is, in many ways, still treated as a prince. His meals are served on golden plates, his robes are made of the finest silk, and courtiers still bow when they enter his presence. But these are empty gestures now, the hollow rituals of a court that has made him safe by making him powerless. "Tell me what you see from the window today, Marcus," Constantine says to his secretary, a young man who has become his eyes to the world beyond his chambers. Marcus looks out at the Bosphorus, where the light dances on the water like scattered diamonds. "The same as always, Basileus," he says, still using the imperial title out of habit, out of respect, out of pity. "Ships from the east, bringing silk and spices, fishermen casting their nets. The sun is setting, and the sky is the color of—" He pauses, searching for words that a blind man can understand. "Purple," Constantine finishes quietly. "The sky is always purple at sunset, I remember." But does he remember? After 10 years of darkness, do the colors remain vivid in his mind, or have they faded like old paintings left too long in the sun? Does he still dream of the golden mosaics in Hagia Sophia, or has his world become entirely one of sound and touch and the bitter taste of memory? His uncle Isaac died 3 years ago, succeeded by his son Michael, who treats Constantine with the distant kindness reserved for tragic figures who no longer pose any threat. Michael sends gifts at Christmas and Easter, fine wines and rare books that Constantine cannot read, as if somehow these tokens can purchase absolution for the family's sins. "There is news from the capital," Marcus says carefully. "The emperor has announced his intention to marry the daughter of the Hungarian king. The wedding will be magnificent, they say. Dignitaries from across the known world will attend." Constantine nods, his scarred eye sockets hidden behind silk bandages that he wears not from necessity but from courtesy to others. "And our family will be represented by a blind ghost in silk robes, sitting in the corner like a living reminder of the price of ambition." But here is the terrible irony. Constantine's blindness, meant to remove him from the game of imperial politics, has instead made him something else entirely. He has become a symbol, a rallying point for those who oppose the current dynasty. Visitors come to his chambers, not many, for such visits are dangerous, but enough to remind him that his name still carries weight in the empire. "They call you the rightful emperor," Marcus whispers one evening, as he helps Constantine prepare for bed. "In the taverns, in the markets, they say you were the chosen heir, that your blindness was a crime against God and nature." Constantine laughs, but there is no humor in it. "Rightful emperor? I cannot even find my own chamber pot without assistance. What kind of emperor would I make?" But perhaps that is precisely the point. In his blindness, Constantine has become perfect in a way that no sighted emperor could be. He cannot see the corruption of his court, cannot be swayed by the beauty of a courtier's face or the gleam of gold. He has become, in the minds of his supporters, a philosopher king, a Marcus Aurelius who has been purified by suffering. "Sometimes," Constantine says to Marcus in the quiet hours before dawn, "I think my uncle did me a favor. I will never have to order a child's eyes put out. I will never have to choose between my conscience and my crown. I will never have to become the kind of man who can sleep soundly after destroying his own family." Yet even as he speaks these words, there is something in his voice, a note of longing, of regret, of dreams that die hard. Because deep inside, in the secret chambers of his heart, Constantine still dreams of the throne that was stolen from him. He dreams of justice, of revenge, of the day when those who blinded him will face their own reckoning. But that day will never come. Constantine will live for another 20 years, dying peacefully in his silk-draped chambers, surrounded by servants who remember him as the kindest master they ever served. His death will be mourned by the common people, who will whisper that the last true emperor has died. But the throne will pass to other hands, other dynasties, other men who will face the same impossible choice between family and power. And in the end, Constantine's blindness will be forgotten, just another casualty in the endless war between love and ambition that defines the Byzantine court. The Byzantine Empire lasted for over 1,000 years, surviving the fall of Rome, the rise of Islam, the Crusades, and countless internal upheavals. But perhaps its greatest achievement was not military or architectural or cultural. Perhaps it was the creation of a system so perfectly designed to perpetuate itself that it could transform love into fear, loyalty into suspicion, and family into the deadliest enemy of all. How many princes lost their sight in those marble halls? How many potential emperors were reduced to silk-clad ghosts, haunting the corridors of power they would never inherit? The records are incomplete. The history is often silent about such family tragedies. But we know enough to understand that what happened to Constantine was not unique, not unprecedented, not even particularly unusual by the standards of Byzantine imperial politics. The practice continued for centuries. Fathers blinded sons, brothers mutilated brothers, uncles condemned nephews to lives of comfortable powerlessness. And each time, the justification was the same: the stability of the empire, the prevention of civil war, the cold logic of survival in a world where mercy was a luxury that emperors could not afford. But what did this cost the empire? What price did Byzantium pay for its 1,000-year survival? Perhaps it was the gradual erosion of the very qualities that made civilization worth preserving: compassion, justice, the belief that some things are more important than power. In the end, the empire that could blind its own children, that could transform family love into political calculation, that could sleep soundly after destroying its own blood, this empire eventually fell. Not to barbarians at the gate, not to foreign invasion, but to its own internal contradictions, its own moral exhaustion, its own inability to remember why it was worth preserving. The last Byzantine emperor, Constantine XI, died fighting on the walls of Constantinople in 1453, his body never found among the ruins of the city his ancestors had ruled for over 1,000 years. He died as he had lived alone, abandoned by allies, betrayed by those who should have supported him. In a way, he too was a victim of the system that his predecessors had created, a system that had taught Romans to fear each other more than they feared their enemies. So, ask yourself, in the end, what conquered Byzantium? Was it the cannons of Mehmed the Conqueror? Was it the gold of Genoese merchants? Was it the divisions between Catholic and Orthodox, between East and West? Or was it something else entirely? Something that had been growing in the marble halls of power for centuries, something that had been nurtured by generations of emperors who chose survival over justice, stability over mercy, power over love. Perhaps in Byzantium, it was not the blades or poisons that ruled, but fear itself, fear of family, fear of succession, fear of the very blood that flowed through imperial veins. And in the end, that fear consumed not just princes and emperors, but the empire itself. The golden city fell, the marble halls crumbled, the mosaics faded, but the fear endured, passed down through generations, whispering in the corridors of power that family is the enemy, that love is weakness, that the price of a crown is the blindness of the heart. And in the silence that follows, we are left to wonder, what empires are we building today? What children are we sacrificing on the altar of our own ambitions? What prices are we paying for power that we tell ourselves we cannot afford to lose? The echoes of those marble halls still whisper to us across the centuries, reminding us that the greatest empires often die not from external conquest, but from the poison they brew in their own hearts. The golden city is gone, the purple is faded, the emperors are dust. But the lesson remains: power without mercy is not strength, it is merely the slow suicide of the soul.